gonna have to go from last time and say spooky children.
Spooky children.
Like really pale, spooky children that are really still and just kind of stare at you. What about you? What's scary to you?
Oh, I had a actual real spooky thing happen to me this Spooktober.
What?
Because I had extensive dental work.
That is spooky.
Oh my god, I've never had to do too much dental stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's the worst. I hated it so much.
It's scary. I hate it.
I get why it's in horror movies. Have you ever seen Marathon Man?
No, but
Oh,
I've definitely
spooky.
seen dentistry used as like a horror device.
It is. It's
Yeah.
one of the scariest things that everyone just has to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about, like, what did they do in the 1800s?
Pulled out teeth.
You just not have teeth.
Yeah, they just like strapped you down and pulled out your teeth.
Wow.
If they hurt,
They just liquor you up,
Yeah.
yank it out.
yeah. If it
Maybe
hurts,
knock you out with a brick and a sock.
if it turns black,
Yeah.
they just like pull them down.
Because I had state-of-the-art medical supplies being used on me.
Yeah.
And it was still the worst. I
Yeah, you
hated
got some cool stuff that I haven't had before.
it. Like needles.
Well, I've had needles, but I mean like
and drills.
the anesthetic thing that they used on you is pretty cool.
Yeah, they knocked me out with a wine bottle.
Just like the 1800s.
Yeah. First, you drink all the wine, and that gets you halfway there. Then they knock you out with the bottle. That's the rest of it.
Oh, and you don't wake up as quickly because you're drunk.
Well, welcome everyone to another episode of Spooky. I love this. You should too. My name is Indy Root Canal Randawa, and with me is the lovely Samantha Spooky Pale Kids He's.
Spooky Pale Kids.
Did that have to be pale? Is that spookier?
Yes.
Like a nice bronzed kid isn't as scary.
No, they look like they've been on like a happy family vacation. It's less scary then. Although some people's spooky thing, family vacations.
There you go.
Yeah.
Ooh.
So maybe that's who would be scared of a bronzed child.
Well, welcome everyone as we continue Spooktober, where we'll be talking about all spooky things.
Ooh.
Just like
It
that.
was the obligatory
Ghost noise.
one every episode, yeah.
And I Love This, You Should Too is part of the Alberta Podcast Network, which is locally grown and community supported. And like I said, this week we're doing more Spooktober. All October, we're only going to be talking about spooky things because is it our favorite time of year? We're both very Christmassy people.
We
as
are
well.
very Christmassy people, but I think Halloween and Christmas are just like
It's our jam.
it's our jam. And I think it's like a solid 3 months of like holiday time for us.
Yeah.
Because we start October 1st and then November 1st, it's Christmas.
I don't agree with that. I go December 1st, I get into Christmas.
What do you
So-
celebrate in November then?
Remembrance Day? American Thanksgiving? I don't know.
Oh, yeah. The genocide?
Yeah. Celebrating genocide.
Yikes.
Let's go back to Halloween because it's much less scary.
I agree. I think we should take a moment and talk about some of our fellow Alberta Podcast Network podcasts who are also doing spooky Halloween episodes. The first one is Makeshift Stories, which is an original science fiction podcast, and they are putting out a spooky episode called Digital Apparition, which is your cell phone might be haunted, and it will be out on October 18th. The other one is called It's a Conspiracy. It's a podcast where the hosts look at conspiracy theories, alternate accounts, legends, myths, and more. They will be putting out a Halloween-themed episode that will be released on October 14th, and they discuss Halloween in Lebanon, Bloody Mary, and that time Greg's mom stole his candy.
Oh, Greg's mom.
So check that out October 14th. And of course, we look forward to listening to those episodes too.
Yeah, I want to hear all about Greg's mom. Well, that segues nicely into our first sponsor of the episode, which is Pod Power. And with Pod Power, our sponsors are making it possible for us to amplify the voices of Albertans and Alberta podcaster. And this episode, the Edmonton Community Foundation is helping us give a Pod Power shout out to, I'm going to go with one of my favorites, and that is my good friends at Overdue Finds
Oh,
from the
yeah.
Edmonton Public Library. And in this podcast, hosts Bryce Crittenden and Caroline Land host conversations about books, movies, music, pop culture, and other interesting news about Edmonton. And it's a great way to learn more about what's happening at EPL, the Edmonton Public Library, and about how you can use your library card to access all of EPL's in-person and online services, which right now could be me teaching you 3D printing over the computer.
Or baby sign language.
Or I can teach you baby sign language. That's mostly for the babies, but, whoever.
I enjoyed learning baby sign language.
Well, then you can come to one of my classes, too.
Indy is multi-talented.
And I, of course, have to then shout out a specific episode of the EPL Overdue Finds podcast both because I'm on it and because it was a horror-themed Halloween one.
Oh,
so
more
that
spooky.
Is episode 42 entitled Oh, the Horror, where I get to talk about a few things I love, which is, of course, is Halloween, Night of the Living Dead. There's some Shining in there. So you can check out that podcast or any of their other episodes. And you can find that wherever you're listening to us. You could find Overdue Finds, or you can go to the EPL website, which is epl.ca. And if you add a /podcast, you can go right to the Overdue Finds site.
Awesome. And you can find all of these podcasts wherever you're listening to our podcast.
Well, let's get into our spooky stuff. And this week, we are each going to give you a spoiler-free review of something we're into that is spooky. And then Samantha will tell us what we are going to watch for next week's big episode. But before that, Samantha, what's your thing of the week?
So my thing of the week is a podcast. It is called The Labyrinth. It is a Spotify exclusive, and it is made by the makers of Case File. So if you're familiar with Case File, they do a lot of true crime, and this podcast is a documentary series narrating the case of a mysterious disappearance from the National Forest in Arizona.
Oh, there's so many national park and national forest disappearances.
I know. I've been getting pretty into it, and then this one came out, and I had to listen to it. So it's really interesting.
My favorite ones are the ones where someone disappears and then reappears weeks later, hundreds of miles away, and they don't know how they got there.
And they have no memory of where they've been.
But tell me more about this one.
So this case surrounds Janet Castrillon, who disappeared in 2015 when she was camping with her family in a remote location near the Chirichua Mountains in Arizona, where she seemingly vanished into thin air without anybody noticing. One of the really interesting things that you find out in the second episode is that she suffered a pretty traumatic brain injury. So she wouldn't have been wandering off or driving away or going off with anybody because she was pretty dependent on her parents. It turns out other similar disappearances occurred nearby around the same time, prompting questions as to whether there may have been a connection between them. Labyrinth also explores the general topic of people going missing from national parks, and in this podcast you hear interviews with members of law enforcement agencies, family of the missing, as well as insights from some renowned crime analysts.
That's really interesting because this whole idea is... it's just so big because there's so many disappearances.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you probably know better than I do, like the numbers on it, but it is a shockingly high number. But it's interesting to get into one specific case like this.
Yeah.
So are there multiple episodes in this, all about the one case?
Yes, there are 10 episodes out right now. I kind of listened to all of them really, really quickly, so I'm not 100% sure if there's more because I haven't been back to check yet, but it was kind of one of those podcasts where you just keep loading up episodes because you just want to really hear what's going on. You get really swept in.
Feel free not to answer if this spoils it, but do we get an answer? Or does it spoil it to answer that question?
I don't want to answer.
Okay.
I don't want to answer because I want you to go on the ride that I went on.
Sure.
Because you start to hear really interesting tidbits and it really sways you one way, and then you hear more information, it sways you another way, and then you're like really mixed up by the time you're closer to the end of the podcast. So It's pretty cool.
Interesting. So is this one of those that the format is there's a host or two with lots of interviews?
Yes, so there's a host. She did a bunch of the investigation work herself. She does a whole bunch of interviews herself. And then she also has people who just like come on and speak as well that aren't really in interview format.
Interesting.
Yeah, so if you're really into national park disappearances, this is definitely a good show because it's a little bit more of a deep dive.
Okay, you don't have to give away too much, but is there mention of aliens in this?
No.
Okay.
I wish.
I was kind of hoping it would be an alien
I would
one.
have told you about this one sooner if there had been aliens mentioned in it, because I bring you all my alien-related content.
I'm getting really into aliens right now because, so everyone has different coping mechanisms. Mm-hmm. And the news is very hard to read. Yes. It doesn't stop me from doing it, but I need some sort of palate cleanser afterwards. And my go-tos are cat videos, dog videos, and alien stories. Mm-hmm. Because aliens, believe it or not, and I don't even know which side I fall on, it's harder. I guess everything can be political, but I can read a story about aliens and it's not also tagged on like, oh yeah, and let's kill the Jews. Yeah. Because so much of everything gets into either racism or misogyny is built into everything I read anywhere, it seems.
So true. And if aliens, I think if aliens were to come, I don't think that they'd discriminate by race.
So this is a really sad thought, but let's put it out there anyway. Over a year ago on this podcast, every now and then we get something really right. Mm-hmm. Every now and then we get something really wrong, and it is on the record. Yeah. At the beginning of the pandemic, I said the one good thing we can take away from this, it's terrible, people are dying, but this is something that isn't political or race-based. It's something we can all get together, and sometimes you need a unified enemy for everyone to join forces.
Like aliens.
And there's nothing like, you can't possibly politicize a virus. It is apolitical. It is a virus we can all join together and be on the same side and eradicate, and it'll be like the first time the world has come together. That's what I said. Yeah. Oh, fuck, I was so wrong.
Oh my god. So if you're one of our listeners who lives in Alberta, you'll know this even more, but this is probably one of the most political things to happen to the world.
And in a lot of other places as well. Yeah. And frankly, we are pretty privileged in how we can deal with it. It is a political thing, and people are... We should stop also using the word anti-vaxxer. Don't say anti-vaxxer, say pro-virus. Or pro-pandemic. Yeah. There are a lot of pro-viral people here for some reason, but we have the infrastructure where we can still live a lot of our normal lives. Mm-hmm. It's not to the point where in a lot of countries where people are just dying in the streets constantly. Exactly. So we have a lot of privilege, but we are not using that privilege. But back to what I was saying is, if aliens were to come, I would say... Well, this is one thing. All people will be on the same side. We're all one to the aliens. But now I know that's not the case because some people will be like, aliens? It must be the fault of those Chinese. Let's go bomb China now. Right? Yeah. Like, that's how it'll go. It'll be the most ridiculous thing if aliens made contact. It wouldn't just be like, hey, looks like we're all on the same side because aliens are so far away from all of us. Yeah. But that's not the case. Because we are the worst.
Remember at the beginning of the pandemic?
I do.
We were such babies then.
Yeah. I was scared in a much more innocent way. Yeah. Now I'm scared and disillusioned in a worse way, I guess. Because now I know that people will just let other people die. Yeah. And they don't care.
Just step right over them in order to get what they need. Yeah. Yeah. It's weird being jaded and scared.
You know what it is? It's spooky. See, what's spookier than... lack of faith in your common man. Oh, we laugh to stop the tears.
If I don't laugh, I'll just start screaming and never stop.
Back to this podcast. Sounds super interesting. And it is called Labyrinth?
It's called The Labyrinth.
The Labyrinth. So it doesn't have any David Bowie-based Goblin Kings.
No. So it's The Labyrinth by Case File, and it's only available on Spotify.
I don't like how podcasts are going to like what network TV was, how it's all specific.
You can only get it one place, yeah.
And I loved that podcasting was a like kind of truly democratic because it's all free, it's all anyone can make it, but now that's not the case anymore. That being said, Spotify, if you're looking to buy some content, we will sell out real quick.
100%. We will be totally yours. We love you, Alberta Podcast Network, but if Spotify comes...
we go where the money goes.
We go.
And that being said, Spotify, the price starts at $1 million.
Each.
Episode.
Oh, I was going to settle for my own $1 million, but you're right. $1 million an episode.
Yep, that's what it'll take.
Just aim high. So, Indy, what is your spooky thing of the week?
So I did what I often do, went to the old DVD cabinet, picked out a few spooky movies that I already love and own, and thought, which one do I want to rewatch and talk about today? And I also wanted to get something that many people could watch.
Yes, we try to do that.
Found something that is also on Netflix, and that is the 2015, I guess maybe psychological horror called The Witch.
Oh.
Often spelled with 2 V's rather than a W.
Oh.
Because this movie takes place in the 1630s, and the W, not common practice yet.
Really?
Yeah, they would use 2 V's.
Interesting.
Really, W should be called double V.
Yeah.
Because then they formed them together to make... Yeah, the alphabet was different. Because remember, there was that FS type thing?
Yes, yeah. And then, like, in old-timey buildings and stuff, sometimes there's letters that are used differently.
Yeah, like we have the ye old. We love to say that. They don't pronounce it like that. It was still pronounced with a TH.
Yeah.
The old. But anyways, so in 2015, I went and saw The Witch in theaters. And... there were maybe 4 people in the theater. And this wasn't a small art house theater. It was a big one. And when I came out, the staff said, like, oh, terrible, huh? And I was like, wait, no. And they said, oh, usually everyone who comes out of this movie comes and demands their money back. And I was like, wait, this movie? Because this was pretty great. And they went on to say how much they hated it. And it is a very hated movie.
Huh.
So on Rotten Tomatoes, it has about a 50% audience score and a 90% critic score, which is a huge discrepancy.
I don't know that I know of a movie that has that.
Yeah. So I asked people, why do you hate this movie? And the most common answer I got was, oh, their accents. I couldn't understand them a lot. And I'm just going to dismiss that because I don't think that's a legitimate reason to not like a movie. I guess if you can't understand what's going on, that's difficult. But you can watch it on Netflix and use the subtitles, I guess.
Yeah,
if you can't
there's
understand
lots of ways to get around that.
Also, I didn't find it difficult to understand at all, but maybe that's just me. And then the other thing is that people said it's slow and this is not horror. I guess there are parts where the movie is slow moving. It has a 90-minute runtime, though, so it's not like a long, prolonged experience. Slow. And I feel like when people say, like, oh, it's not really horror, I think, like with anything, a lot of people who are horror nerds have very specific ideas of this is and this isn't. But really, like, film genres are unnecessary. If it's a good movie, it's a good movie. What you classify it as shouldn't make it good or bad. So maybe if you don't even think about it as a horror, then you'll like it more. I think it definitely is a horror movie because it's spooky and scary things happen. Horrifying things happen, therefore it is a horror. If you determine genres of movie being how close it is to Saw or Annabelle, because that's what you're most exposed to.
Right.
Yeah, it's not a horror movie like those. It doesn't have a lot of jump scares. It doesn't have nearly as many haunted dolls as movies these days should have.
Right.
But I think it's very scary. And I remember the kind of dialogue around the movie, at least on my end, was kind of like, see, this is why we can't have nice things. Someone put so much work and effort into thinking out every little element of this movie, and then people are just like, oh no, nothing jumped out at me, so it's a bad movie now.
Yeah, I wasn't scared.
I was saying before that I think it is a fair criticism if you don't understand something. And I think that we shouldn't go about thinking like, oh, this movie's too smart for you.
Right.
That's why you don't get it.
Right.
I think that makes us seem like snobs, really.
Oh, for sure.
But on the other hand, when people talk about movies like this, I feel like maybe it is fair to criticize a movie if it's inaccessible, but I don't think it's fair to criticize a movie for just not being what you want.
Right.
Just because you came to see Saw 7 and then you got this period piece that's really atmospheric, I don't feel that's a valid criticism.
Right.
But if you find that it is so inaccessible and kind of arcane, that could be a valid criticism.
Okay.
I don't think this gets into that, but this movie is kind of free of jump scares, but more one of those slow burn or those movies that the horror just kind of burrows and it gets under your skin or to your skeleton, as I now like to say. It scares you right to your skeleton.
Oh, wow. That's deep. It's a kind of like the movie we watched last week with The Orphanage.
Perhaps slower, though. And I don't think The Orphanage is a particularly slow movie. I think the pacing is very good in that. But in this movie, the dread builds at an even slower pace, perhaps.
Oh, wow.
And I think this movie is full of uneasiness, and that's that kind of dread that leads to the real horror.
Right, okay.
So this was written and directed by Robert Eggers, who is the writer and director of The Lighthouse, which we did on this podcast.
Yeah.
Which you had mixed feelings, should we say?
Mixed feelings. I don't think I really enjoyed it that much.
You kind of disliked it, but you appreciate some parts of it.
Yes. So I can see how it is very critically good, and it's very well done for what it is. I didn't enjoy watching it.
Right.
But I can see why you would.
For you, perhaps it was more about the discussion and the learning than the actual enjoyment of the film.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is not nearly as kind of out there or as art house as The Lighthouse was, but it still has a lot of those same elements, like that attention to detail, because this movie takes place in the 1630s and the costumes were made in the same way. They don't just look like it. They made all of it.
Oh, see, I love when they do that, when costume designers do that, and they sew things by hand and like with the kind of thread that they would actually use.
Yeah, and the set, every roof is thatched properly in the technique of the 1630s.
Oh, I love that.
They made a working farm only using the implements that they had available in the 1630s. The language is very precise to that time period as well. Most of it was taken directly from period sources, from letters and things like that. So it is very authentic. But what's interesting about this movie, usually you can't tell, because if you're getting a specialist who knows how roofs were thatched in the 1600s, but you never show that roof, is it really necessary?
Yeah, that could be a corner you could cut.
But I think when you're paying that much attention to detail, you're probably paying a lot of attention to every other detail as well. It's kind of like the thing about riders for like rock musicians, right? There's always the joke about how your rider is what you get guaranteed in your backstage for your concert. Right. So I can't remember who it was that said the bowl of M&Ms but no brown M&Ms. And people look at all these complex writers saying that, oh, that's just egomaniacs doing what they want. But when you talk to musicians who do it, they're saying that we put those very specific things in because that shows us the attention to detail at that venue. Right. If they're going to take out all the brown M&Ms, I believe my pyrotechnics are going to go off and not set me on fire. Fair. All of my sound is going to be great. They're going to have that attention to detail. Right. So maybe that's kind of the same way we could look at this.
I didn't know that about musicians.
Yeah.
I definitely knew that it was like a test of some sort, but it definitely didn't realize that it was for like safety and how much you can rely on the venue.
So this takes place in New England in the 1630s about, and in the first 2 minutes it gets set up that there is this family. Of course, they're part of a Puritan colony that has left England, And they are now being exiled from their colony because they are kind of too pure for the Puritans. Mm-hmm. They're too strict in their religious doctrine, even for a colony of Puritans.
Oh, wow.
So this family is exiled, and it's kind of like they're double exiled, right? Because they've left England for religious persecution. Now they're leaving this colony as well. And it just emphasizes this idea of isolation, of this family who is in the wilderness now, and they are going to try to make a life for themselves. And they live on the limit of a forest. So there's a forest just that they can see, and they're living in a clearing trying to farm. And that's like classic fairy tale allegory stuff, that there's this forest and that always represents the unknown, the dangers of the new world, all sorts of different things like that. And that's why all of those fairy tales, there's something in the forest. There's a witch of the woods.
Right.
And that is definitely what this movie takes off of. Mm-hmm. In fact, the full title is called The Witch, A New England Folktale. So they're really leaning into that, not fairy tale, because this movie isn't so much a parable, but rather the opposite of a parable.
Oh, okay.
Which I won't explain because I don't want to give away.
Right.
I'm going to talk around this movie
Perfect.
a lot. I think one thing that makes it super scary is at this time, these Puritans, like, try to put yourself in their mindset that they believe in a literal devil. Isn't that scary when you think about it?
That is scary, yeah.
Because I'm very far removed from that. I don't believe in like literal hells or anything like that. But they did. And there are parts in this movie where we think, I'm not going to give anything away, maybe somebody is dead. And the fear isn't just about that this person is dead. The fear is they're in hell now. And that's so terrifying for them because they're like, oh, this loved one of mine is now experiencing eternal damnation. And if you really believe in it, like these people did, that's so scary.
That is super scary, yeah. But that's why the preacher or like the minister was such a powerful figure in town, because they held the keys to everyone's salvation, and then they manipulated it in most towns to kind of become the most powerful man.
Yeah, and this movie actually works as kind of like a prequel to things like The Crucible, because this is before the witch trials, but it's kind of the seeds of the fear that would lead to the witch trials.
Right.
Actually, now that I say that, that's exactly what this movie is.
Okay.
And at the beginning of this movie, the fear is very literal. Like a lot of horror movies, you're like, is this real? Is this a metaphor? It starts you off like, no, it's real. Here it is. And then as things go on, you're like, is it? It's the opposite of a lot of other movies where you're like, wait, what's real? And then at the end, you're like, oh yeah, there's the ghost. Cool. So it's real.
Yeah.
This kind of starts you off at a place where you know exactly what's going on. And the more it goes on, the more you question yourself and the movie.
Ooh, yeah.
Which is a nice inversion that you don't see very often.
Oh, I like that though.
The score in this movie, I think, is fantastic. It could be very hated by others. Mm-hmm. It's mostly strings and like a chorus of moans or shrieks.
Ooh.
So there's elements of that in The Shining or in The Omen, and when it's done well, it is very unsettling and frightening, and I think it is done well here.
I love that when the soundtrack is kind of unnoticeable, but really helps for the feel of the movie.
Yeah, me too. I will say though, that's probably not the case here. This is a noticeable soundtrack.
Okay, sounds good. I just know that like I keep referencing the movie we watched last, but that soundtrack, The Orphanage, like the sounds of the house and the sounds of skittering and everything really do a good job of like keeping you on edge the entire time.
There is some of that too, but when the score, the actual like non-diegetic music comes in, it is apparent.
Okay.
It's not subtle. It's effective. I wouldn't say it's subtle though. It also has great cinematography because again, someone who pays this much attention to detail, they're going to set up all of their shots very specifically.
Yes, absolutely.
Don't expect any Blair Witch shaky cam in here. It reminds me of The Shining in a lot of ways because they're clearly classic formalists in how they set up things. It's not avant-garde in the way the shots are composed or the way the film is made.
Right.
They are employing things to a different end, perhaps, and the storytelling may be very new and innovative, but Kubrick and Eggers are definitely formalists.
Right.
They know the language of film, and they're not breaking new ground in that respect, but rather through the storytelling and themes.
Okay.
A lot of shots in this are directly from paintings of the 1600s. If you are an art historian, you'll probably be like, oh, yeah, I get that one. And I don't want to say the painter because that gives away a lot of the ending.
Oh, okay.
Because if you go like, oh, yeah, if that's the painter you're mimicking, I know what's going to happen. But the ending, I think, very cool. A lot of people don't like it, but a lot of people don't like this movie. So I'll just leave it at that. It also deals a lot with religious fervor and religious hypocrisy. And of course, something of this time period kind of has to tackle that on. And so many movies that have witches in them are very anti-woman, right?
Yeah.
Because the very nature of what we think a witch is just kind of, in this time period, you are either a chaste, like saintly woman who takes care of her
virtue
father
and her honor.
or husband.
Yeah.
That's your one option. Your other option is a witch.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of middle ground. And this movie, I think, can be read on a very strong feminist level. And I think there's a lot of stuff that is a clear reaction to these binary patriarchal systems. You don't have to look into all of that. I think it's quite apparent to me, but again, like in any good movie, the audience will see in this movie what they want to see, and they'll believe what they want to believe. It is definitely one of those ones that is maybe not open for interpretation as to what happens. I think there are concrete answers to what happens in this movie.
Right.
But as to what that means, I think there's a lot of leeway.
Oh, okay, cool. So it lets you kind of decide.
Yeah. I don't think it's a movie where you're like, wait, what happened? I don't understand the physical elements of the story.
Yeah.
I don't think it's one of those. But the meaning behind all of this, I think, is more open. I think it's pretty clear, but then again, I feel like that a lot, and I could be way, way off.
I do occasionally watch a movie with you, and I'm like, I don't get it. And then I have to go do some reading.
So I watched this thinking that it'll never be one we do on this podcast, because I thought, based on The Lighthouse, it was a fun episode. I don't think you like it, so I was going to stay away from this. But this is much more accessible than The Lighthouse, I'd say. And I know you have a lot of interest in this era and witch trials and things like that. So I think you might actually like it. So maybe we will do it at one point.
I'm going to have to put it on my Netflix playlist, because I feel like I should be watching spookier things right now, because it's Spooktober.
It is Spooktober.
So maybe that'll be one of my lunchtime watches or something.
I would say don't make it a lunchtime
No?
watch. If you're going to watch a movie like this that puts so much work into atmosphere building, sit down, put it on a good screen, not on your phone, turn off the lights. It's only an hour and a half. Sit down, watch it, give it a chance, because it really relies on this atmosphere building. And I think when you're watching it over a couple of lunch hours, so much of that is lost.
Right.
I'm also someone who won't watch movies in less than ideal circumstances.
True.
I like to give the due attention to a good movie where so much time and effort is put into it. If it's Rush Hour 3, maybe I'll watch that over a few lunch breaks.
That's fair. That's why I definitely have genres of shows that I'll be like, okay, that's a lunch watch.
And that's not even a slam on Rush Hour 3. I actually really like Jackie Chan performances, and I think he's very enjoyable. But yeah, The Witch, sometimes spelled with 2 V's instead of the W, is available on Netflix or at your local library, whatever like that. And Eggers went on to do The Lighthouse after this. This was his debut, and when this came out, I was like, I can't wait to see what this guy is going to do next. Around this time, actually, there was a lot of horror films that came out where I'm very excited to see what the director would do next. I think there is a kind of a resurgence into some good quality horror, because I think this same year was The Babadook and It Follows. So some really interesting stuff. And now I hear Eggers is doing a Nosferatu remake. And Nosferatu, the original, was one of my favorite movies. The Herzog Klaus Kinski remake from like 79, I think, is also brilliant. So now to see a new version is going to be interesting. And I think he's having some of the same actors from The Witch be in this one as well.
Interesting. Okay.
So go check out The Witch.
Okay, well, I will make sure it's dark and spooky when I watch it. Well, that brings us to our second sponsor of the podcast. Our sponsor is Roomy by Atco. If you've been listening for a few episodes in a row, you'll know that Indy and I just recently bought a house. And we've used Roomy a few times to get quotes from contractors. They have an Ask a Home Inspector service where you can speak to a home inspector without having to completely hire them and get some advice on how to best proceed, whether it's a plumbing issue, an electrical issue, or if you're trying to just fix it yourself. The Ask a Home Inspector program can kind of point you in the right direction for your project. Indy and I were lucky to find a very great home inspector through Roomy, who walked us through and who also offered us his services after we move in. So we have great access to someone who really knows our house and has kind of crawled around every inch of it. So if you need a home inspector or a painter or just want to ask about your do-it-yourself project, you can visit roomy.ca. That's RUMI.ca. And let Roomy's trusted local experts take care of your home.
Did the home inspector find any ghosts when they were inspecting?
I think that might be a separate service.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Roomy, yeah, that's a good clarification, does not provide ghost-busting services.
No.
Yet.
I'm sure it's coming. It's a fairly new program.
That, yeah.
We'll send an email in and say, hey, could you get some ghost services on your menu, please?
Well, Samantha, what are we going to be watching for our next movie? I'm very excited because last year you couldn't think of a spooky movie that I hadn't seen, so we did a classic, something we both were fans of in The Exorcist, which is a good episode. Go check that out.
That is a very good episode.
But it is something original that I have not seen this year, right?
Yes, yeah. So I really took the theme of our podcast to heart and picked a movie that I saw in the early 2000s. It came out in 1998 and is based on a novel of the same name. It is Practical Magic.
All right. I know pretty much nothing about this. I know Sandra Bullock and Nicole Kidman.
Yes.
I think it is lighter than like a straight horror movie.
It is. It's more of a romantic comedy fantasy film.
Okay.
But it has some of those great kind of scary movie things like possession and magic and like curses.
Like a funny possession?
No.
Okay.
No. But there's like some of those classic scary movie things.
So it's a romantic comedy, but then has like a scary possession in it.
Yes.
That's an interesting blend.
It's something I haven't seen probably since like 2000 or 2001. So I don't know if it still stands up.
So what were your feelings on the movie then?
I really enjoyed it. I think I watched it when I was like a young teen. And I think there's like a phase that lots of girls go through where they like want to learn about witches and like the occult and everything.
Very true.
So I was heavily into that phase, I think, when I saw this movie, and I thought it was so cool.
So this was in the early 2000s. So you are kind of was like Charmed big at that time.
Yeah, but I never saw Charmed.
And Buffy was getting into some witch stuff.
Yeah.
The idea of female empowerment through witch characters was kind of at the forefront.
Yes.
Not nearly as much now. Maybe in The Witch. Hint, hint. But, okay, so it was something of that time that was common.
100%.
Something that I don't remember being common was a blend of romantic comedy and horror elements. So that's interesting.
It definitely was one of the first movies I'd watched that had kind of a scarier element to it. But this was a nice kind of ease in for me, I think, because I also really enjoyed romantic comedies back then, too.
At the time, would you say this is a scary movie?
No.
Are parts of it actually scary, or is it kind of like a play on and a joke about scary things?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I think I'm having a hard time answering that question just because I think I was young and hadn't really seen anything like it. So if I did think it was scary, it might have just been because it was like really unknown to me.
Right, because at this point you probably hadn't seen many actual scary movies,
No,
right?
I think I'd seen The Exorcist at this point, and that was it. So that was like my frame of reference of scary movies.
That's a good frame, because that's a scary movie. But you're going to say this is less scary?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the plot of this movie?
So it centers around sisters, Sally and Gillian Owens, who have always known that they were different from other people and that they're witches. They're raised by their aunts after their parents die, and they grew up in a household that was not normal, and they grew up in a very happy, kind of magic-filled home.
Is one of them a free spirit and one of them's like buttoned down?
Yeah.
Is this Sabrina the Teenage Witch, the good TV show?
No, I'm now making that connection, and I think that's really funny.
Is there a talking cat?
No.
Please.
I'm sorry. Unless there is, and I don't remember it, but I am a
very big fan of pretty much all media that employs talking cats.
I know you are. So the Owens family carries a curse.
Oh.
The men they fall in love with are doomed to an untimely death, and now adult women with very different personalities, the quiet Sally and the fiery Gillian must use all of their powers to fight the family curse and a swarm of supernatural forces that could take away all of their lives.
All right, so one's a Hilda, one's a Zelda.
Yeah. So I remember really liking this. I think this might have been like Sandra Bullock's heyday too. So
yeah.
I think I had already seen things that Sandra Bullock was in, and I really liked her. So I was excited to see this, and I think this kind of brought Nicole Kidman into my life as well.
Okay.
So I think that they're really good on screen together. They do a really good job of being these characters.
They're both super talented. I know when I was in junior high, I had a crush on Sandra Bullock for sure. I actually really disliked Nicole Kidman.
Really?
And I'm not sure why, because then as I got older and I watched her, I was like, she's incredibly talented. When I got into like some of her lesser known stuff like Birth or more known like Academy Award nominated stuff like The Hours.
Oh, she's very talented.
She's great.
Yeah.
But there was something about her I didn't like for a long time.
Interesting. She wasn't Sandra Bullock?
Yeah, maybe. But who is?
Who is? So I definitely like this kind of lighthearted magic kind of feel that they give in the synopsis. So I'm excited to watch it again to see if it is how I remember it.
I'm very excited for that too, because I do like movies that are light but magical. Like, one of the worst movies ever, but I still love it, is Simply Irresistible with Sarah Michelle Gellar, where she is a chef and maybe her mom comes back to life as a crab, and then they make magic food.
Yeah.
And it causes people to fight or fall in love, and sometimes they fly. It's so bad, but I recommend everyone go watch Simply Irresistible.
I forgot about that movie.
We can do that on this show. I'd love to. I have a lot of thoughts about that one.
I don't doubt it. So I don't want to give any more away. Also, I am avoiding reading a synopsis of the plot other than what I just read you. So I think the only other thing to do is watch it.
Would you like to watch a trailer for this one, or do you want to keep it very surprised?
I want to keep it very surprised because I feel like it's going to bring back memories of watching this if I watch a trailer. Okay. Yeah.
Do you have predictions going in? What you think you're going to feel now, many years later, rewatching Practical Magic?
I don't know. I'm worried that it's not going to live up to how I remember it.
And you remember loving it.
I remember loving it, yeah. So I don't know. I don't want to make any predictions, but I think I have a sneaking suspicion that it's not quite as good as I remember it. What about you? What do you think?
I don't know. I think if it is a light, fun, here's like magical characters in the modern world, I think I could like that. I probably won't be in love with it, but I think like, oh, that's a fun movie. But when you were saying that there is some kind of more straightforward horror elements, I'm interested to see how they combine the two, because when you get two weird or like mismatched genres and you mash them together, I can really like that.
Yeah.
Like Shaun of the Dead, that's what it is.
Right.
It's a romantic get your girl back movie
that
just happens to take place during a zombie apocalypse.
Yeah.
And I love those two dissonant elements being mashed together because I think it's quite expertly done there.
For sure.
I have no context for this movie, but it's also taking two disparate things, putting them together, and that can make for a great and fun movie. So I'm hoping it's that.
Me too.
But the fact that I know nothing about it, sometimes I'm hoping it's a pleasant surprise and not like I know why no one talks about this movie.
Yeah. I'm nervous. Again, like I am with anything that I used to love when I was younger.
Do you know people that like this movie? Is it still kind of talked about and known?
Well, Wikipedia seems to think it's considered a cult classic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I think there is...
That bodes well.
Yeah, I think that there is a faction of people who really love this movie still. And it's, like, still readily available.
Okay.
So I think maybe it is still, like, really well loved.
It's also interesting that I assume, based on the people in it, that this is a big budget, big studio movie.
It is.
And to get this kind of plot into a big studio movie, like this is something that's horror romantic comedy. I love that kind of thing, but usually it is smaller, more independent productions that kind of do that. So it's interesting that this was in a time where you could just make that kind of movie. I guess I'll have to see it, but from the description, it sounds like a movie that would not be easy to get made today.
Yeah, I think so. It costs $75 million to make. It is...
$75 million?
Yeah.
This better look amazing.
It didn't quite make its money back in the box office.
Oh.
But it's...
$79 million in 98.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a big budget.
This is a big budget movie, yeah.
For a romantic comedy.
Yeah.
Where'd all the money go? I'm going to be curious to see that.
Yeah, I think so. It also has Diane Wiest?
Diane Wiest.
And
I like Diane Wiest.
And Stockard Channing in it.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's got a big cast.
Are they the two aunts of the two main characters?
Yeah, so they play the aunts.
I'm already into this cast.
This whole family, like I remember thinking that they all went together really well.
Oh, and then, so we have those four.
Yeah.
I'm sure we have probably two male leads. One who is like a nice upstanding guy and one who's kind of a rebel.
Yes, so...
Is that part right?
Yes.
Is it?
I believe so. So I don't want to, like, spoil any more of what...
Sure.
Like, who else is in it.
Oh, just don't even say the names?
No, I don't want to...
Oh, is it people that everyone knows?
No, they're people that you're going to guess immediately and be like, oh, that's that guy.
Well, I'm going to see them on screen and know that too.
No, but I want you to do it while we're watching the movie.
Okay.
It's also got Evan Rachel Wood in it.
I don't remember who that is, but I know the name.
She was married to Marilyn Manson. She was in Westworld. She's the... Robot lady in Westworld.
Aren't they all robot ladies?
No, but like the one that goes on the journey with him. In the blue dress. Clearly very memorable. Yeah, so we're gonna watch that. It is available on Amazon Prime Video with a premium subscription. So I believe you need the Stars subscription to get that. But you can rent it from YouTube, Google Play, Apple TV, or you can check your local library.
It is currently on order at the Edmonton Public Library, so hopefully by the time this episode comes out, you'll be able to get it.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm excited to watch this. Are you?
I am.
Okay.
I'm very curious and excited because it seems like it's going to be a light, easy watch, but it also seems like it's going to be not typical.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yeah. Oh, I believe it's also available on Crave. So if you have
there you
Crave.
go.
Unfortunately, we don't. But yeah, so let's meet back here next Monday when we have watched Practical Magic, and we'll find out what Indy thinks about it.
It'll be both practical and magical.
Oh, so magical. Everything's magical with you, though.
Everything's practical with you. That's not the truth at all.
That's the other way.
The practical. Magical.
Magical.
Everything's practically magical with you.
Okay, well, we'll see you next week. Don't get spooked.
No, I'm going to get spooked. It's more fun.
Okay, get real spooked.
Get spooked, everyone.
Okay, bye.
Go spook yourself.